In this video, we're going to look at the updating methods of our lifecycle component. We're going to use a likes button example for this case, and it's simply going to determine if we're popular or not. So it's just going to be a simple button that when you click it, increases the number of likes, and then when you hit a certain number of likes, we're going to determine if you're popular or not. I've got my index.html set up here with the included scripts, and I've also included a CSS file for some styling. Let's go ahead and create our likes component. As always, we're going to start with the name of the component. It's going to be likes component. I'm going to use the React library to create our class and pass in our object specification. Of course, we're going to implement the render method, which as we know is a function, and we're going to return a div. I'm going to give this div a class name of container. This is one of the classes in the style sheet I've given you. And we'll close that div off. Within the div, we're going to have a h1. Now this h1 is going to be the text that says if we're popular or not. And to do this, we're going to use the ternary operator. So the popular value is going to be on our state, and it's going to be a true or false value. And we're going to determine that by determining the current amount of likes, and if they are greater than the amount of likes that we determine you need to be popular. And then using that, if we are popular, we're going to render some text. If we're not going to render any text. So this .state.popular, this is going to be the Boolean that determines if we're popular or not. And then this question mark here is the ternary operator, which I'll explain in just a second. And if this is true, we're going to render the text I'm popular. And if it's false, we're not going to render any text. If you're not familiar with the ternary operator, it works like so. The first value is the expression you want to evaluate, so a true or false expression. And then if the expression is true, the first value is what gets rendered. If it's false, it's the second value. So you're going to give it like this. So if we have true, we have this text, if true, or we have false. So this text, if false. So we pass in an expression here. If it's true, we get the first value in between the colon. If it's false, we get the second value. And we'll see how it works in a bit. If you're not totally clear, when we show you the example, you'll see a bit more. We're then, of course, going to have a button. We'll use a class name of btn blue btn. Again, that's in my style sheet. And of course, we're going to have an on-click event. In our case, it's going to be this .update likes. We're going to have likes in the text of the button, and we're going to have this .props .likes, so the value of the likes, and then we'll close that button off. That's our very simple component. We're going to implement these functions and the state and the props in a second. Just go ahead and use the React DOM library to render our component. Of course, we know how this works now, hopefully. So the what is our likes component, and the where is document.get element by ID of app. Simple. Let's go ahead and implement our default props and our initial state so that we can check out what the component is going to look like and start looking at the updating methods of a lifecycle for a component. get default props, which we've explored already. Of course, it's a function. Now our default props is simply going to return an object with likes, and our likes are going to be naught because no one likes us yet. We're going to have our get initial state, another function. Don't forget the comma. And our initial state is simply going to return if we are popular or not. And we're going to start off not being popular. So popular is going to be false. So you can see here in our ternary operator, this is false. So the text we're going to get is going to be the null. So this would be if true, and this is if false. So it's false, so it's going to be the second parameter. Let's go ahead and open up the browser and just check that our component is working. And it is, so we can see our button here, and it's got the number of likes in the button. Excellent. It's time now to implement our update likes function. I'm going to put this at the top. So update likes function. We've seen functions very similar to this before, but in this case, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to use the React DOM library to render the component back when we update the likes. So we're not going to set our state. We're simply going to render the component and again with the value of the likes plus 1. And we'll see why in a bit. So likes component. And we're going to pass in the property of the likes, in which case is going to be this.props.likes plus 1. Close that off. And of course we know that we're rendering it to our app. So document.get element by ID of app. Simple. Save that. Back onto the browser. Refresh. And then when we click the button, our likes increase. Excellent. The first method we're going to look at is component will receive props. Component will receive props is invoked when a component receives new properties. So when a component is receiving new properties. If we look at our component, we'll see that when we update our likes, so when we click the button, our likes component receives a new property for likes. So it receives likes plus 1 every time we click the button. So each time it receives a new property. And you should use this as an opportunity to react to property transitions before our render function occurs. And you should do this by using this.setState, and we'll see that in a second. Let's go ahead and implement component will receive props. So it's a method, of course. So component will receive. Let's make sure I spell this correctly. Component will receive props, which is a function. Okay, don't forget the comma. Now, component will receive props takes a parameter, an argument of next props. Now you can call it whatever you want, of course, but for clarity's sake, call it next props, just so you know exactly what it is. And then if someone wants to jump into your code later on, they'll see next props, just best practice. I'm going to go ahead and console.log our next props so we can see exactly what's going on. Head on back over to the browser, refresh, open up your developer tools, and let's click our button. So we can see that each time we click our button, our component will receive props, receives the next props. So it receives the likes object, Sorry, it receives the property object, which has the key of likes and the new value. So each time we click, it receives likes plus 1. Excellent. So we can now implement our this.setState to react to a property transition. And in our case, we're going to check if we've got enough likes to be popular. Do this using this.setState. And we're going to set the state of our popular Boolean. And we're going to determine if we are popular or not. So using next props and then the likes value, we're going to determine if that is greater than or equal to 10, then we're going to set popular to be true. So if we've got 10 or more likes, this expression is going to be true. Therefore, our state is going to be true. Our popular state is going to be true. And we'll come down to our ternary operator. And we'll see that if this is true, we'll get the first text here. So we'll get I am popular. Save this. Refresh the browser. So 1, nothing happens. 2, nothing happens. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Nothing happens. Click for 10, and there we go. We get our text. So we're now popular, which is brilliant. And we see that our component has received the property likes with the value 10. Just to show that component will receive props doesn't occur on the initial render of the component, but does occur on subsequent renders, I'm going to console.log component will receive, spelled that wrong, haven't I? Receive props, and then we will console.log component rendered. So on the first render, on the initial render of our component, we should see component rendered, and then when we click the button, we should see the next props, and then component will receive props. Go ahead and refresh the browser. Component is rendered, and we should get component rendered. We don't get component will receive props because it doesn't happen on the initial render. Go ahead and click your likes, and there we go. So our component will receive props gets the new props, and we get the component will receive props log, and then we get our component rendered. That's just to show that component will receive props doesn't happen on the initial render, but does happen on subsequent renders. The next method we're going to look at is should component update, which is invoked before rendering when new props or state are being received. And it's not called for the initial render, the same as will receive props. And you should use this as an opportunity to determine if you want your component to update. And we'll see that now. Go ahead and create our new method, should component update, which is a function. Now, should component update takes two parameters, takes next props, so the same as component will receive props as its first argument, and it then takes next state. Don't forget your comma. Let's go ahead and just console.log should update, and we'll also console.log next props, so our next props, and we'll do that for our state as well, just so we can see exactly what our state and our props are. Get a bit of clarity. So our next state, and we'll also see that this only occurs after the initial render and when components receive new props and new state. Back to the browser, refresh, and we should see our component is refreshed, and in the console we get our component rendered. If we go ahead and click our likes button, we'll see a few things have happened. The first thing is that our likes component hasn't updated. It's still 0, which is not what we kind of expect. If you look in the console, we'll see our component has rendered. So that's our initial render. We'll see our object has been passed. So our new props have been passed to component will receive props. And we then had should component update called. And we've passed our next props and our next state. And we'll also see we've got a warning. Should component update returned undefined instead of a Boolean value. Make sure to return true or false. So, should component update should always return a Boolean, either true or false. That's kind of explained in the error message. If should component update returns false, the render method is completely skipped until the next state change. So what that means is that if should component update always returns false, your component will never update. Only when it returns true will your component update. So technically it's returning undefined, which is pretty much false. So our component is not updating. Let's go ahead and return a Boolean value. Let's return true if our likes value is even and false if our likes value is odd. So return next props.likes, then the percentage symbol, which is the modulus operator. So this returns the remainder when you divide two numbers. So if we use next props.likes modulus 2, if next props.likes is even, we'll get no return value, we'll get no remainder, so we know it's even. If it's odd, we will get a remainder, and it's odd. So if next props.likes is even, it's true, otherwise false. Save this, back over to the browser, refresh your page. Our component has rendered, and we should get our console.log. Component has rendered, sweet. Click the likes, and we'll see should component update next props likes is 1, which is odd. We haven't got the warning now because we're returning a Boolean value. Click it again, it's 2, which is even, and it updates. So odd, 3, even 4, and it updates. Odd 5, even 6, and it updates. Which is brilliant. The next method we're going to look at is component did update. Component did update is invoked immediately after the component's updates are flushed to the DOM. So after our render method has happened. After the DOM is updated, the component is rendered, then component did update is called. In the same way with component will receive props and should component update, component did update is not called for the initial render. You should use component did update as an opportunity to operate on the DOM once your component has been updated. In your text editor, let's go ahead and implement component did update after our render method. So component did update is a function. Component did update takes two parameters. It takes our previous properties and our previous state. Our previous props and previous state are the values that were in our component before it updated. So when you click the button, our update likes button first time, our previous props are going to be 0, but our current props are going to be 1. So our current likes are going to be 1, previous is going to be 0. Click 2, previous property is going to be 1, current is 2. We'll see that now. So console.log our previous props pass in our previous props after that. And we'll do exactly the same for our state. Okay, one thing I'm going to do just before we head on to the browser is just comment out our should update and our component will receive props, just to make it a bit cleaner in our console. I'll leave the render there as well. Refresh your component and we'll see our component has rendered and our likes are 0. Now when I click the button first time, nothing's going to happen. Why is this? Because our should component update is determining that our likes are odd and returning false. Click it again, our likes are now 2, which is even, so our component updates. And we'll see that our previous properties, likes are 1 and our state is false, which is what you'd expect. So our current property is 2, our previous is 1. If we go ahead and click this all the way up to 10, we'll see our I'm popular, and we'll see previous likes was 9, popular was false because it was false. But if we make it 12, we'll see previous likes 11 and popular true. With component did update, you do have access to the DOM. And I'm just going to show this using the React DOM library. So React DOM.find DOM node, and we'll pass in this, which of course is going to be our component. Save that, refresh the browser. Component is rendered. Click the button once, nothing happens. Click the button twice, our component updates, and we'll see we have access to the DOM. Our component is logged to the console. They are the update methods for the lifecycle of a React component. So we've got component will receive props, should component update, and component did update. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed my video, please like, share, and subscribe. If you've got any comments, suggestions, or ideas for videos, leave them in the comments below. Send me a tweet at Codewithtim, or send me an email, codewithtim@gmail.com.